Jessica. We are in a relationship series entitled Love Lies. Love Lies. And the reason we called it that is not because love itself is a lie or somehow it's sort of pie in the sky, sort of misleading type thing. But the reason we're talking about it, the reason we call it Love Lies, is we want to tackle some of the common myths and misconceptions oftentimes around love that we so often buy into. And listen, before some of you kind of start checking out, everybody start thinking, well, it's a relationship series, I'm not in a relationship, I don't even have a desire to be in a relationship, and what does this have to do with me? The truth is, this actually has a lot to do with you. It has a lot to do with you, especially when you think about it. Really, when it comes to a lot of the problems we wrestle with, we stress about, we worry about, we pray about in our life, is that I dare say the majority of the problems in our life are really relationship problems. In fact, I dare say 99% of the problems you deal with it's somewhere along the line a relationship problem. Maybe it's problems around our relationship with others. Maybe it's the problem around even maybe a lack of relationship with others, or maybe even certainly our relationship with God. And so I want to kind of tackle this, and again, regardless of your relationship status, I think that God has something that He wants to speak into your life and into your situation over the next several weeks. Whether you're single, whether you're married, whether it's dealing with a relationship issue or struggle at work or in your family. Listen, I think that the principles that we're going to be talking about, even though certainly we're emphasizing the romantic side of relationship and love, the principles we're talking about, I think, work across the board to really help improve and really, I think, breathe some fresh life into so many of our relationships. All right, so with that said, I want to kind of set the mood for this a little bit. So kind of get you thinking along these lines. And so what I want to do is kind of to set the mood, really sort of test your kind of pop culture knowledge when it comes to love. And specifically love and songs. And so this little illustration, it's going to require some audience participation. Let's just put it that way. It really requires audience participation because I don't want to be left on an island doing this myself. But what we're going to do is we're going to play some songs, and when you start hearing that song, I want you to start singing along with it. And then there's going to come a point where that song's going to stop, and we're going to see how many of you know the words and can keep singing along with that song, okay? Don't leave me on an island with this. This is not my sweet spot. So, all right. So here's the first song. Let's see if anyone can kind of recognize this one.
I just want to say,
come on, you guys sing.
I love you.
Yeah, little Stevie Wonder.
I just called to say how much I care.
There you go.
I just called to say I love you, and I mean it from I just.
Nice! Way to go! Yeah! Get the first one. Okay, I'll make it a little more challenging here. Let's do the second.
In life with loneliness.
There we go. You feel it? Yeah. A little Titanic.
Here, far,
Wherever you are. And I don't know the rest of the song. Some of you guys do know the words. Wow, way to go. Yeah. Okay, all right. Last one here.
There's no tenderness or peaceful fingertips.
Jeremy knows this one.
You're trying hard not to show me, baby. But baby,
Come on, Junior.
baby, I know it. You lost that love feeling. Whoa, that love feeling. You lost that love feeling. Now it's gone, gone, gone. Whoa.
Nice. Chris, I don't know why you don't ask me to do worship. I think I got skills here. Anyway, hey, we live in a culture and a society that loves to sing about love, talk about love, write movies and stories and read stories about love and about relationships. But how many know quantity doesn't always equate to quality? Just because there's a lot of information out there when it comes to relationships and love, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all quality information. It's stuff that's really helpful, stuff that's really beneficial. And so over the next several weeks, we're going to be really looking at the Word of God. Well, what does the Bible have to say about love and relationships? And so to do that, we're going to be starting off with a story in the Bible of sort of a love story gone wrong. A love story gone wrong. It's a story of David and Michal. David and Michal. And we find it in 1 Samuel chapter 6. So if you have your Bibles, you might want to turn there. Otherwise, you can kind of follow on the screen. But we're going to be looking at 2 Samuel chapter 6. And again, this is a couple that song, talking about losing that loving feeling, that's where they're at. Like when we actually catch up with their part of the story, of sort of their romance of the story, this is sort of the portion of their love story that's sort of like the After the Rose episode. The After the Rose episode. Any Bachelor or Bachelorette fans in the house? Okay, how about this? All right, because I know no one's going to admit to it. How many of you know somebody who watches The Bachelor or Bachelorette? Because I know you would never watch something like that, right? So let me just kind of put a little perspective here, because some of you are like, I don't even know what that is. I've never heard of that show before. Well, the general premise of The Bachelor and Bachelorette is that basically you've got a bachelor or a bachelorette who decides to date basically like 20 guys or 20 gals all at the same time, hoping to get it down to that one final person who will get to give that last rose and to get this epic proposal and to find basically the one for them. Now, not shockingly, or I should say shockingly, this doesn't always work out with a happily ever after in the end. As for the Bachelor or Bachelorette, which leads to the After the Rose episode, which is typically an episode filled with a lot of tears and a lot of heartbreak and a lot of yelling and screaming and if they could, probably a lot of furniture throwing. And in a way, that's kind of what we see in this story. This is basically the After the Rose section or portion of David and Michal's love story. See, David, just a little context, he's recently become king. He's coming back into Jerusalem. He's coming back home from this epic military victory against the Philistine army. And so he goes home and he hits the streets of Jerusalem, and there's just this celebration. There's this party, and everyone's just celebrating the incredible victory that he had just kind of fought and achieved. And so this is where we catch up to the story. 2 Samuel chapter 6, verse 16. As it says, he, speaking of David here, entered the city of David, which is Jerusalem, and Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. When she saw King David leaping and dancing before the Lord, she was filled with contempt for him. When David returned home, we'll skip it down to verse 20. When David returned home to bless his own family, this is after the celebration, this is after the big party in the streets. When he returned home to bless his own family, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. She said in disgust, "How distinguished the king of Israel looked today, shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might too. It continues on. David retorted to Michal after this moment didn't go the way he envisioned, the way he thought it was going to go. He says, hey, I was dancing before the Lord who chose me above your father and all his family. He appointed me as the leader of Israel, the people of the Lord, so I celebrate before the Lord. Yes, and I'm willing to look even more foolish than this, even to be humiliated in my own eyes. But those servant girls you mentioned will indeed think I am distinguished. And as a result of this kind of downward spiral, this downward conversation, eventually it sort of leads to this really tragic kind of conclusion to their love story. And we see it in 2 Samuel 6:23. It says, so Michal, the daughter of Saul, remained childless throughout her entire life. And again, we read this, and you can't help but read it and go, where did it all go wrong? Well, like this was the perfect love story, right? I mean, how did it go from a fairy tale to a horror story? From loving each other to just downright hating each other, despising each other, having contempt for one another. And listen, I think we get a clue about where it went wrong in verse 16. In fact, actually, there's one phrase in particular that really, I think this whole story really hinges on. And we see here in verse 16, it says, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked down from her window. So you got to understand, before this, like their love story was just amazing. It was up and to the right. It was the stuff of fairy tales. The king of Israel marrying the princess, right? It was a total fairy tale thing. But after this verse, it all goes downhill. After this moment of her, it says, looking down from her window. And I share this and I highlight this because speaking of love lies, truth is we live in a world, in a culture that loves to live at the window. That loves to live at the window. This place where we buy into the lie that the answer to my life, the answer to my happiness, the answer to my joy, the answer to my fulfillment is always somewhere out there. Somewhere out there, somewhere on the other side of that window. It's somewhere out there, and this is especially true when it comes to our relationships. Especially true when it comes to our relationships. This tendency, I mean, you can kind of think of it this way, for those of you that are single, how this oftentimes plays out is this ideal. Oftentimes we kind of grow up and maybe we've got dreams of finding Mr. Right, finding Mrs. Right, and we got dreams of the perfect relationship, the perfect marriage, the perfect situation. So we look out, and when we constantly look and constantly scout everywhere we can find across the land, looking out the window, trying to find the one. Because if I can just find Mr. Right, or if I can just find Mrs. Right, that will lead to a right relationship. And yet the problem with that is it's a lie. It's a lie. And the reason I say it's a lie is because how many know the truth is you can find the right person and still have the wrong relationship. You can find the right person and still have the wrong relationship. I was thinking of a story that I heard some time ago of this frog who, true story, actually. This frog who was just desperate to experience love. And so he goes to a fortune teller and he just starts pouring his heart out. So, will I ever, ask this fortune teller, will I ever experience love? Will I ever have someone to love me? And the fortune teller kind of takes a moment, kind of pauses, and then speaks up and looks up and goes, well, I got good news and bad news for you. And then so the frog's like, okay, well, give me the good news first. And the fortune teller goes, well, hey, when I look at your future, I see a girl that is passionately interested in you. And the frog's like, man, that's great. It's like, how can there be any bad news with this, right? And she goes, well, the bad news is you're going to find her in biology class. I know, geez, yeah. Some of you dads will appreciate that. You'll be able to use that over and over again. Yeah, great pastoral joke. But anyway, again, though, you can, find the right person and still have the wrong relationship. In fact, we see this oftentimes in marriages. We see this a lot in marriages where a spouse starts to live at the window. And rather than being fixated on finding the one, we get fixated on fixing the one we already got. Right? Like where we look out there and we look at all the things my partner needs to fix. My partner needs to do, my spouse needs to do it. And we start saying things and we start thinking things like, well, if they would just fill in the blank. Like if he would just find and pick up his underwear off the floor, everything would be great. Or if she would spend a little less time, on the phone or watching 24/7 Hallmark movies, everything would be great, right? And we create this and we live at the window, idealizing what we don't have and criticizing what we do have. Criticizing what we do have. And that's exactly what we see in the story. The story with David and Michal, and really 4 things that actually play out in this text that happen in all of our lives, in all of our relationships, when we spend our time living at the window and become window watchers with our lives. Window watchers with our relationships. And the first thing we see in their kind of love story gone wrong and sort of dangers of window watching is the first thing is that window watching blurs blessings. Window watching blurs blessings. Check this out, verse 20. It says, when David returned home to bless his own family, Michal, the daughter of Saul, came out to meet him. Now, you got to know, in ancient times, you didn't just bless somebody with words. When you came to bless somebody, that term blessing it always came with a gift. There was always something of substance. So basically what we get here, we get this picture of David kind of coming back, and he's got flowers in hand, he's got the box of chocolates in hand, ready to bless his spouse. I mean, he's coming back from some time away from the family. I just had this incredible victory, and he's like, man, I just want to show some love to my wife. I want to show some love to my spouse. And so he gets this gift and brings this gift to her. And interesting enough, not even like a special occasion for her. It wasn't like Valentine's Day or like a birthday. I mean, he's just doing this just out of sheer love for her. And yet, I don't know if any of you have ever experienced this, but have you ever like bought a gift, or taken the time to do something that you thought, man, like I nailed it. Like the moment my spouse or my boyfriend or my girlfriend, they see this gift, hearts are going to shoot off, stars are going to be, birds are going to chirp, it's going to be stuff of fairy tales, right? Nobody? Wow, maybe we need to up our game on gifts, right? But in fact, actually, I was thinking about this, and I remember when Holly and I lived in Phoenix, and she'd never seen the Grand Canyon. And so I thought, man, I want to do something really nice for her. And so I thought, well, something really nice would be just to take a day drive and take a day trip over to the Grand Canyon. So we made the 5-hour drive nonstop, pretty much right there to the Grand Canyon. And so we get there, and again, in my mind, I'm expecting, hugs and kisses and like thank you so much, like tears, like when she sees the Grand Canyon, because she'd never seen it before. Like she's just going to just jump into my arms and like, you're just such the best husband. Thank you for taking me out here to see this. But that's not actually what happens. We get there, she gets out and she takes a look for, I kid you not, maybe 20 seconds. She looks around, she's like, is there anywhere to eat around here? And I was just like crushed. I'm like, we just drove 5 hours. We're looking at one of the 7 natural wonders of the world. All you can think about is what we're going to eat, right? Now, I do have to say, in her defense, there was a little more to this story. It was that in those 5 hours leading up to it, she'd constantly been looking out the window at every McDonald's and every rest area, telling me how hungry she was. And yet I was so focused on, no, we got to get there. We got to make it to the Grand Canyon. You're going to love it. Don't worry about your hunger. And so, anyway, I share that with you because, again, sometimes window watching can blur blessings, even when it's justified. In her case, she was very justified to have some blurring happen to the blessing of what she was seeing. But again, when we look at the story, that's what's happening. Here, this window watching is blurred her vision of the blessings that her spouse was. So she meets him at the door, and she just begins to kind of tear into him. She begins to go into it because she was so fixated on looking out the window. She looked right past what he brought. Right past the gift, right past the blessing he was, right past the good things he ever did. And part of the reason I say that whenever we look out the window, we sometimes can end up with a very blurred vision, even be blinded to the blessings in our life. is because something you got to understand is that to look at that person and to look at them through the window requires you to look through a pain of pain. It requires you to look through some dirt. It requires you to look through some brokenness. It requires you to look through some wounds and some expectations and sometimes some hurt and unresolved pain. In fact, I put it this way, is that your perception of others, you've got to understand, is always tinted by your own injuries and insecurities. It's always tinted by your own injuries and insecurities, your wounds, your issues, your past, your unresolved hurt, your hunger pains, right? The way someone else treated you, the thing that in your life you never found healing from. And listen, that's why I oftentimes say around here is, listen, how you see your spouse actually says more about you than it does about them. It actually says more about you than it does about them. Well, you don't understand. You don't understand the issues that she has or he's got and how messed up they are. Well, maybe. Or maybe it's that you've got messed up perspective. That there's some brokenness, that there's some pain, there's some dirt that you're looking through. Because remember, again, David was like the ultimate bachelor. David was the guy who had it all. Like if there was a finding the one, he would be the one. I mean, think about it. I mean, David was, again, he was an incredible war hero, an incredible fighter. In one moment, he could, slit your throat and defeat an entire army. The next moment, he's singing love songs, right? He's, publishing worship albums. He was a king. He was a man, the Bible said, it was after God's own heart. And yet she couldn't see it. She couldn't see it because of her window watching. Because of her window watching, because of the pain she was looking through, she became blinded to the blessings in her relationship. Which leads to the second thing, is that window watching always finds faults. Window watching always finds faults because I can't see the good, and so now all I can see and all I can seem to focus on is the bad, is the issues, all the things they could be doing better, or I wish they would do better, or the things I wish they would change. And that's what we see in 2 Samuel 6:20. She said and discussed how distinguished the king of Israel looked today, shamelessly exposing himself to the servant girls like any vulgar person might do. See, she was disgusted with him because he didn't look distinguished enough. And now we read that and it's like, boy, that seems so small, that seems so silly. But something you've got to understand about Michal is that she was a princess. She grew up in a royal home. She grew up with her dad, Saul, as the king of Israel. And so as a result, that created some expectations. And yet here on the flip side, David was a guy who was a no one from nowhere. He didn't grow up with all the royal pedigree and the royal protocol. He didn't know how. He was learning on the job. And so she has all these expectations, and you just see it kind of playing out in her mind, like, hey, why couldn't you just be more like my dad? And why couldn't you, why are you doing this? Why are you acting this way? And she had all these expectations, and it's this moment in the story where reality meets expectation. Reality meets expectation. And listen, any relationship that you have, how many know there comes a point where reality crashes into your expectation? And it's not always pleasant, right? Anyone ever been there? When the reality of the relationship really hits? If not, I'm telling you, go get there. And in fact, those of you who are single and like, it's going to be a fairy tale, and it's going to really say, hey, look, I'm not questioning that he might be the right guy or she may be perfect for you. But what I'm saying is it's not ever going to be like what you envision. The reality and expectations, there's going to come a point where those are going to crash together. In fact, there was a little video clip that kind of speaks to this and some of the expectations, sometimes the unrealistic expectations we bring into relationships. And it was a little skit given by comedian Jim Gaffigan. And I want you to take a look at this. Check this out.
I was eating a pint of ice cream in sweatpants like a man. My wife came in the room. She was like, Jim, are you going to eat an entire pint of ice cream by yourself? I was like, hopefully. Unless you selfishly want a bite. Jim, you have a 9-year-old daughter. Don't you want to be at her wedding? Not really. No. Wait, is there going to be ice cream at her wedding? Because if you promise, I still don't want to go. How would attending a wedding, why would that be an incentive? It's like, don't you die and eat 18 years, there's an awkward party you have to pay for. And we need you to write a check. Now, I understand weddings are an important event where we spend a lot of money so that the bride can pretend to be a princess and marry her prince and live happily ever after because magic exists. And we're a bunch of weirdos. Weddings are kind of weird. I mean, what's the logic? It's like, well, we love each other. Why don't we pretend we have a kingdom? We'll invite your parents' friends and my parents' friends, and we'll have a banquet. And the two kingdoms shall come together as one. And we can start our married life with a total fantasy before we go on a completely unjustified vacation.
Again, there comes a point where reality crashes into expectation, and that's what we see in this story too. And as a result, McCall, because of her frustration that her reality wasn't turning into the fairy tale she thought it was going to be, that David wasn't living up to the expectations she had, she starts doing what a lot of us do. She starts blaming David for the cause of all of her misery, the cause of all of her struggles, the cause of all of her pain. She starts to kind of enter into this blame game. And listen, when I say that, you got to understand that that's human nature. In fact, we see this actually in the very first relationship with Adam and Eve. Remember the fall of humanity when here Adam and Eve, they've got this garden of everything they could ever want, and yet Eve focuses on the one thing she doesn't have, the one thing she's lacking. And it's this fruit. It's this fruit from the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and evil. And so she takes it, she eats it along with Adam, and eventually God calls him on it. God shows up and he speaks to him and challenges him on it. And I love Adam's response. And again, he just does what our natural tendency oftentimes is. He basically, rather than taking responsibility, rather than saying, hey, here's my deal. We both messed up here. We both made a mistake. Look what he says. He says, who told you that you were naked? Yeah, it goes on. Keep going. Verse 12. It says, the man replied, it was the woman you gave me, the fruit, and I ate it. I love the fact, by the way, too, he doesn't even use her name. Like, I don't know who she is anymore. Like, that was your thing, God. And again, it's human nature. We have this tendency sometimes when things aren't working out the way maybe we thought they would or we hoped they would, there could be this tendency to sort of try to dive into the blame game. The problem with that is that it never works. Because, listen, nobody's ever won the blame game ever. Nobody's ever won. Nobody wins the blame game. It's not like Eve is like, you know what, honey, you're right. Like, you're right. Thank you for pointing out my mistake. Thank you for pointing out my stuff. I'm a whole new woman now. It doesn't work that way. Nobody ever responds to blame like that. It doesn't work. You don't ever win the blame game. And again, I get the pushback because we tend to be like, well, you don't understand. I got some issues, and she has some issues. They have some issues, and again, we just want to kind of think, oh, well, if they could just fix this or change this, and everything would be great, and everything would be rosy. And again, that's kind of what McCall is saying. She dives into this blame game, and that leads to the third thing window watching breeds, and that is window watching bursts bitterness. It bursts bitterness. It has a way of turning allies into enemies. Because listen, when you watch through the window, ultimately you war through the window. I think the great theologian Pat Benatar said it best when she said, love is like a battlefield, right? This is where again, when we dive into the blame game, and if you would just change this, and if you would just fix this, and if you would just do this, then all of a sudden it becomes this battle of slinging one accusation, laying blame on another person. It becomes this whole cycle of, well, it's you and your problem and your issue, and you really need to pray about this. And listen, I'm telling you, what the preacher said, look, I don't think you totally heard. In fact, I'm going to copy and paste the link to this message so you can listen to it again, because there's some things that you need to change, right? That you need to fix. And as a result, it bursts bitterness. Because something you've got to understand about this story is that David in no way in this story is blameless in this. He's far from blameless in this. Like he had every opportunity to diffuse the situation. He could totally diffuse the situation. He could have totally stopped this downward cycle and spiral where this conversation and where this situation is going. But instead of choosing to make things better, he chooses to just get bitter. He chooses to just get bitter. And we see this. We see this play out in his words in 2 Samuel 6:21. It says, David retorted to Michal. In other words, here he hears an earful from her, and rather than diffusing the situation, he just shoots right back. And then listen to what he says. It says, I was dancing before the Lord, who chose me above your father and all his family. Okay, come on, has anyone ever had one of those kind of conversations or arguments with your spouse or with your boyfriend or with your girlfriend, where it just kind of starts this downward spiral where you find yourself saying things you really didn't even mean, saying things and crossing lines. You know that even in the moment, like, I know I should not have just said that. I should not have crossed that line. And that's what's happening here. I mean, basically what David's saying here is he just starts shooting back. Because he got hurt, because he got wounded, he was going to make her hurt. And so he's like basically saying, hey, listen, you're just mad. The only reason you're mad at me is because God chose me over your daddy. God chose me over your brother, your crazy brother from your crazy family. That's basically what he's saying here. And he doesn't even stop there, too. Like you would think that somewhere along the line you'd get a little bit of a check and balance if this is not going well. But instead, he piles on. Check this out. 2 Samuel 6:22 says, but those servant girls you mentioned will indeed think I am distinguished. In other words, hey, by the way, Michal, you know those girls that I know you feel really insecure about? That old high school girlfriend that I still have a Facebook connection with? Hey, you know what? Hey, if you don't like what I bring to the table, what I offer, I can find someone who will. That's what he's saying. That's where he's going. I mean, talking about crossing a line. So talking about, digging yourself more than a hole, digging yourself a grave. And listen, so many of us, we do the same thing. We get stuck in this cycle of bitterness where most of us, much like David, we're giving what we got, not what we want. Because I got hurt, because I got wounded, because I got offended, because I got disappointed. And rather than giving what we want, rather than giving forgiveness that we might experience peace, rather than giving honor that we might start to find some respect, rather than giving time and attention that we might find the romance and the feelings again, we just shoot back with what we got. I got hurt. I got wounded. I got bitter. And it's a cycle of bitterness, and it ultimately ends in this very last thing that window watching leads to, and that is that window watching ultimately ends intimacy. Window watching ultimately ends intimacy. We see this in verse 23. It says, so Michal, the daughter of Saul, remained childless throughout her entire life. Now, we don't know for sure why she remained childless, but I don't think it was because she couldn't have kids. Unless you consider a broken heart to be a medical condition. Because, listen, a prerequisite for intimacy in any relationship is vulnerability. And you can't be vulnerable with an ally you've allowed and you've turned into an enemy. When someone wounds you or someone hurts you, you're not going to be vulnerable. What you're going to do is you're going to put up walls, right? You're going to put up defenses, and it kills intimacy. And listen, I share this with you because I wonder if for some of you, when you look at some of your relationships, and again, this doesn't even have to just be a romantic relationship. Maybe it's a relationship with a son or a daughter or somebody at work that just, man, it just feels like a battlefield. It just feels like slinging one insult to the next, where you once were allies, now it feels like you're enemies. And listen, I share this story because for some of you, again, this is more than a story that just took place thousands of years ago. For some of you, we're not talking about something once upon a time or in a galaxy far, far away. This is your story. This is where you're living right now, in your relationship, in your marriage, with your kids, with a boss, with a coworker. And yet here's where I love this story. We kind of start to bring this to a close, is that, and this is really the hope in the story. This is the hope in the story. See, something you got to understand about sort of the difference between how the world views love and how the Bible views love is pretty significant. See, how the world views love is it's often simply defined by feelings. Defined by feelings. And so, as a result, not that slide yet. So as a result, oftentimes what we'll say is, we'll say things like, well, I just fell in love. I just fell in love. And really, when we're saying that, what we're saying is love is kind of a feeling that I'm sort of at the mercy of. It's accidental, because no one like typically falls on purpose, right? It's not like, if I just fell into my car, it's typically an accident. And so as a result, it kind of creates this picture that love is somehow something that's always beyond our control. Beyond somehow our influence or our grasp, right? And so as a result, just as easy it is, to fall into love, we can also fall out of love. But the Bible has a very different view of love. See, the Bible doesn't define it as so much as a feeling. When the Bible talks about love, it defines it as a choice. It defines it as a choice. In fact, we see this. Maybe one of the greatest examples of this in 1 Corinthians 13. And I love how the Message puts it. It says, love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut, doesn't have a swelled head, doesn't force itself on others. It goes on, it says, it isn't always me first, doesn't fly off the handle, doesn't keep the score. It doesn't keep score of the sins of others. It always looks for the best. It never looks back, but keeps going to the end. Love never dies. And in fact, some translation says love always wins. I love that. But again, notice it's a choice. These aren't feelings. It's not, I'll be patient when I feel like it. Love others and care for others when you feel like it. No, these are choices. These choices. I'm choosing to be patient. I'm choosing to forgive. I'm choosing to extend kindness. I'm choosing to show honor. And listen, here's where the hope comes into this. Because if I've got a choice, listen, if love is a choice, it means I have a choice when it comes to the relationships and even love stories in my life. It means that how David and McCall's story ended doesn't have to mean that my story is going to end that same way. Because if love's a choice, that means I've got a choice. I've got to say how this story plays out, how this relationship plays out. And it's a choice that for some of us, it begins right here. It begins with this choice to simply decide, you know what, I'm good, rather than living at the window, placing blame, and oh, if they would fix this, or if they would do that, or singles, man, if I could just find the one, it's this choice to say, you know what, I'm going to do something a little different. Rather than flipping out, I'm going to choose to flip the frame. And choose to flip the frame. And listen, I wonder for some of us, don't miss this, for some of us, I wonder how our relationships would be different. How the script and the story of maybe some of our marriages and some of our relationship with our kids would be different if in choosing to flip the script, we did so by choosing to flip the frame. How we perceived, how we looked at our relationships, how we looked at our situation. In fact, I like how James 1:23 puts it, because truth is the answer. It's never at the window. It's always in the mirror. And I like how James puts it in this verse. It says, for if you listen to the word, it's like glancing at your face in a mirror. In fact, I want to ask this to you. Those of you who are single, do you know how many verses are in the Bible all about just finding the right person? About finding the one. How many verses in the Bible there are about that? The answer is 0. There's none. But do you know how many times the Bible talks about becoming the right person? A whole lot. Those of us who are married, do you know how many times the Bible talks about you somehow changing your spouse, critiquing them, pointing out all their issues? 0. You know how many times it talks about letting God work on your life first, and then when you do, He'll actually start working on theirs as well? A whole lot. In fact, Jesus maybe expresses this the best in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 4. He says, how can you think of saying to your friend, and which, by the way, is always how it's presented to you. It's like, I'm just trying to help you out. I'm just trying to be a friend to you. He says, let me help you get rid of that speck in your eye, right? And what does Jesus say? He says, no. You're missing it. In fact, he goes on and says, a hypocrite.
Hypocrite, because how can you tell somebody, encourage someone to get rid of that speck in their eye when you've got a plank in your own eye? In other words, you've got to start with you. You've got to start in the mirror. You want to start seeing some change. You want to start seeing some things differently in your life. For many of you, the change you want to see, it starts when you change where you're staring, where you're focused on, what you're looking at. Because the truth is, I can't always change whether or not they got a speck, but I can choose whether or not I stare at it, whether I get focused on it. And listen, I've found successful relationships, they don't watch the window, they meditate on the mirror. People have great relationships. They don't have great relationships because they're so great at nagging and coercing and demeaning their spouse. But it's those who sit there, even when their spouse is a little less than the king that he is, a little less than the queen that she is. They say things or do things that they shouldn't have done or said. It's the person who can sit there and say, you know what? I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it didn't hurt. But I realize that for this thing to change, for us to have life on the other end of it, listen, that change, it has to start with me. It has to start with me not staring at a window, but actually flipping the frame and looking at the mirror. Because the truth is, in my life, in your life, I can't fix you. You can't fix your spouse. You can't fix your friend. You can't fix that boss. You can't fix you. In fact, and let's not share it, because some of you, I think we have this tendency to almost kind of think we're like the Holy Spirit, but it's not your job to fix them. It's not your job to fix them. And listen, if you're single and you're processing, are they the one? And might I add, if part of your equation is, well, I can fix her or I can fix him, that should be a warning sign right there that they're probably not the one. Because you can't fix them. You can't fix them. In fact, there's a great story, we'll wrap it up with this, in Luke 10 that speaks to this. It's actually a relationship issue between two sisters, Mary and Martha. As Jesus, he shows up to the house, and Martha, she's all busy getting things ready for this meal. And what's Mary doing? Mary's just hanging out at the feet of Jesus, hanging out with Jesus, right? Listening to him teach and just kicking back. And of course, this makes Martha furious. Martha gets distracted. She starts looking out the window, and she does what a lot of us do. It's like you're not keeping up your end of the bargain, Mary. Like here, I'm doing all this work, and I'm carrying. Listen, some of you are like this in relationships. You sit there and think, man, I'm the only one that's putting any effort into this relationship. I'm the only one praying for this relationship. I'm the only one stepping up and actually investing in this relationship. And that's what Martha's kind of doing here. And she's frustrated about it. She's angry about it. So she takes it to Jesus, which that was the right thing to do. But it's interesting how Jesus responds to her. Because you almost think that Jesus would be like, you're right. Mary, you need to go help your sister out. But that's not what he does. In fact, it's interesting, Jesus' response. Verse 41, here's what he says. It says, but the Lord said to her, my dear Martha, you're worried and upset over all these details. Some translations say Martha, Martha. Martha, Martha. Now, her name is significant here. Her name literally means rebellious. We're rebellious. Like you thought you had it rough raising your kids? Like, imagine raising a kid whose name is literally rebellious, right? But what's he doing here? He's saying, Martha, look, I know it hurts. I'm not saying what she's doing is right. I get that. But you really want to change it? It's not going to happen by flipping out. It's not even going to happen by you trying to fix it. It's going to happen when you flip the frame. And Martha, when you realize that yeah, she's got some issues. She's got some things she needs to work on. But she's not the only one. Like, we all got our stuff. We all got our issues. And basically holds up a mirror to her. And I love how he ends up. Verse 42 says, there's only one thing worth being concerned about. Mary has discovered it, and it will not be taken away from her. Some translations put it this way, Mary has chosen a better way. Mary's chosen a better way. And listen, that's my encouragement to you. Is that regardless of where your relationship is, whatever your relationship status is, will you choose a better way? Because to wrap up with this, is that there really are two ways when it comes to love and our approach to love. There's the world's way. In fact, I think we got a slide there. And again, this is all what we just talked about. It's well, if I can find the right person, right? And I so long to find fulfillment, find joy. And if I just find the right person, somehow I'll have the right relationship. And hopefully finding the right person will fall in love. And again, it's almost like this concept that's beyond our control, beyond our grasp. And if I fall in love, then I can fix all my hopes and dreams on them because they'll bring a joy, they'll bring a satisfaction, they'll bring a fulfillment that I'm so desperate for in life. And then when that fails, because it always does fail, because truth is, no person can carry that weight. In fact, I kind of it'd be like me going home and my wife. Every time I showed up, my wife saying, "You complete me. You complete me. I'm depending on I need to be feeling better about my life. I need some more joy. I need some more fulfillment. I need some more." So you need to give. I mean, she's constantly doing that. She does not. But if she's constantly doing that, how many know it would be really easy to start spending a little more time at the office? So spend a little more time at the golf course, because at the golf course I don't have Jeremy like whispering in my ear like, "You complete me. You are everything." I mean, there's so much pressure on that. And it's a pressure that listen, you and I weren't created to bear. You and I were created to uphold. We weren't meant to be a person's joy, meant to be a person's fulfillment. We can be a part of that, but we weren't meant to be the whole source. And so oftentimes what happens is we follow the world's way, just like David and McCall did, and failure occurs, and we just get caught up in this never-ending cycle. But again, there's a better way, and the better way is God's way. And that is, rather than trying to find the right person, rather than always looking out the window, it's about choosing to take some ownership and saying, "I'm going to choose to become the right person." And rather than falling in love, seeing love is more than just a feeling, but a choice. I'm going to choose to walk in love. I'm going to choose to be patient. I'm going to choose to be kind. I'm going to choose to show honor, even when maybe what they do isn't so honor-worthy. Right? And as a result, I'm going to fix all my hopes and my dreams not on a person, but on the only one who can really fulfill all those dreams and all those hopes. And that's in a relationship with God. And listen, when I mess up, and you'll mess up in your relationship with God a couple times. If failure occurs, you just repeat steps 1, 2, and 3. Just keep going back to Him and encountering this grace that the Bible says is more than sufficient for all of our slips, all of our hang-ups, all of our issues. I want to pray for you tonight. And again, regardless of where your relationship status is, I don't know where that is. But I do know we all wrestle with relationship problems. Whether you're single, whether you're married, whether you're divorced, whether you're like, "Man, I have no interest in being in a relationship," we all deal with relationship problems. And it's in those problems, you and I, we have a choice. We can choose to do it the world's way. They're constantly looking out the window, and if they would just do this, and they would fix this, and if they would, or you can choose God's way. You can choose to flip the frame and say, "God, what is it that you're trying to work on my life? What changes are you trying to create and calling me to make in my own life? I'm going to choose to not look out the window and look for something, look for, if I just find the right one, if they just be the right one. I'm going to choose to allow you to transform me and to change me by taking time to become the right person." And listen, how we do that is simply, it's in relationship with you, God. I'm choosing to this day forward, this week, God, I'm choosing to take some time just to be in relationship with you. Because the truth is, I can't ever hope to have a right relationship with others if there's not a right relationship with you. And when I do that, listen, your word, again, it's like a mirror. And when I spend time in your word, when I spend time with you, God, it's amazing how you begin to work and you begin to transform us, and there begins to be fruit in my life. And look, I'm not saying that your life is going to change instantaneously tomorrow. Like, oh, I'm going to start, rather than looking out the window, I'm going to start with the mirror. I'm going to start just getting it in God's word. And I'm not saying that all of a sudden your relationship's going to be perfect and rosy and all great after that. But I do know that's where it starts. That's where healing in your relationship starts. That's where satisfaction and fulfillment you long for, it's where it starts. It starts with you. It starts with you looking in the mirror of His Word it starts with you allowing and accepting that invitation to be in a right relationship with Him. And listen, for some of you, again, your relationships, the reason it's such a challenge is this right here. You've never accepted that invitation. You've never asked Jesus to come into your life, or truth be told, it's just been a really long time. And if that's you, this is your opportunity. With every head bowed, every eye closed, I want to give you that invitation to ask Jesus to come into your life. To make things right, to get back in our right relationship with Him. I'm telling you, when you do that, just watch how He transforms some of the relationships and things around your life. So if that's you, every head bowed, every eye closed, you'd say, God, I want to accept that invitation. I want to ask you into my life. If you'd simply raise your hand, I want to pray with you. We're not going to embarrass you. We're not going to call you up. I just want to pray with you. It is prayer with me. Father God, I recognize that I've made more than a few mistakes. And God, when I hear your word and when I look at your word, it really is. It's like a mirror into the very depths of my soul. I recognize that God, I've slipped up, I've messed up more than a few times. And yet, God, what your word also reminds me of is this reality of the depths of your love. That I can take confidence that there's a God who loved me enough to come on this cosmic rescue mission from heaven, to come to earth, to die on a cross 2,000 years ago. That because of the price you paid in full on that cross, I don't have to live in a cycle of bitterness. I don't have to live in a cycle of regret. I don't have to live in this shame. I don't have to live with a hopelessness when it comes to my future. But Jesus, because now I ask you to come into my life and be the Lord and Savior of my life. All right, God, I step out of here. I walk out of here tonight. Not bringing in, not walking out with the same baggage I brought in here. I walk out of here free, whole, and restored because of your grace and your goodness. In Jesus' name.
Amen.
Amen. Let's stand up and worship our God.